I have something to share with you. What do you think of that? Oh, that's baby Sloan. It's a girl.
It's a girl.
It's a girl.
Whose baby is that?
Mine. Yes, girl. You think I just got mad all of a sudden?
No, she's not.
Yes.
She's sucking her thumb. She's a mover.
Really?
Oh my God.
That's awesome, Kristen.
I got 3D modeling. Thank you. I got 3D modeling also, but she looks like an alien in those.
Like this, yeah.
We're gonna start on a high note.
Yeah. I'm so excited and I'm moving because I gave her so much blood. Guys, so we're going to talk about listing presentation today. We're going to talk about the key elements that go into a listing presentation. We're going to talk about delivering presentation etiquette, some tips and tricks for how to control the situation a little bit better. We're going to also look at a copy of the KW template for listing presentation. And I'll answer any questions you have. So I will also go over like preparation because even myself, right? I'm very fortunate in my career because I'm farther along. Most of my business is warm business. And what do I mean by that? It's referral business. I go into most of my meetings with a pretty warm reception, maybe even already knowing the people and with people who have vouched for me. But when I go into a cold listing presentation, I still get super, super nervous, right? So I'm no different than you when it comes to that. And so I'm going to share with you all of the tricks I have for, controlling that situation, best preparing for it, all of that. All right, so let's start off with what goes into a listing presentation. Just like with buyer consult, which we discussed yesterday, you're going to have things that always go into a listing presentation, like a professional headshot. Okay, so I don't care how great you look in that photo that you took in Cabo last year. That is not a professional photography. That's not professional photography. Right? You want one done by a professional photographer and preferably with a transparent background because you'll want to impose this on marketing materials. And you want to keep, for the most part, a consistent, visible headshot. Okay. Do you need to change them? Yes, I haven't taken a new one in 8 years. I don't plan on it until after the baby. Should I have taken one a couple of years ago? Yeah, probably. But keep it consistent, keep it current. A headshot should last for a few years. You might want a couple of versions. Definitely want the transparent background so it doesn't clash with any of your marketing materials. Professional bio, okay? And I would highly recommend hiring a professional writer to write your professional bio because it's weird. You speak about yourself in the third person.
ChatGPT cannot do it.
Huh?
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Oh.
AI. ChatGPT.
AI.
No.
It's very professional.
Well, that's nice.
ChatGPT.
Kristen says no.
Yeah. Why is a professional bio so important? Well, even with professional writers, they get it wrong a lot of the time. Let me tell you about what I want to see and the things to look out for and correct. First off, if you're a newer agent and you don't have a bio already, you are going to need to tie in past professional experience and your skills and strengths to how it translates to providing, high-level real estate services. You might have a difficult time with that. As a newer agent, you might also have a difficult time with the terminology. The writer that you hire may not be super familiar with the terminology in real estate because not everyone's familiar with the profession, but also state to state, it differs quite a bit. So you will, if you hire a professional writer, you're still going to need to show this bio many times for revisions to experienced real estate agents so they can help you out with that. Some of the other pitfalls I see is that a bio might be a way too buyer or way too seller centric. You want to make sure that your buyer doesn't exclude any potential client, right? You want to work with both. Maybe you only want to work with sellers, but that's very unlikely to happen. So good luck with that. So I want to make sure that, my bio somehow includes that I can provide services to buyers, sellers, investors, whether that's a first time, buyer or seller or really experienced client. Also, one of the things that I see in bios often that, kind of makes me cringe is it will be way too hard or way too fluffy. While I want to show my care and consideration for my clients, I also need to show that I'm a skilled negotiator who's going to achieve their objectives. Right? So I don't want it to be all harsh. I'm not, like a, East Coast law firm litigator out to go like murder people. But fairly close, right? Fairly close, but also with care and concern, right? So in my bio, I make it very clear that I care, that I perform my duties ethically, but that I really enjoy strategy, negotiation, educating my clients, making sure they're involved in all decision-making, those kinds of things, right? So I don't want to be too fluffy. I'm here to do a professional job, right? That involves some pretty intense negotiations at times, but I also don't want to be portrayed as, Wolf of Wall Street type, because I need my clients to know that I care and that they can trust me. So there's that balancing act there of including both the professional and harder side and the softer side. References, if you have them, if you're a newer agent, that's going to be harder. So if you need references, if you're in the mentorship program, you're going to have your mentor with you at these meetings. You can leverage their past sales and clients so that you have references. If that's not going to be the case, or you're not in mentorship, then I would recommend asking someone like Justin Jacobson, Josh, myself, maybe one of the owners of the company, to see if you can list them as a reference. But remember, I mentioned this yesterday, if I have no idea who you are, don't even ask me. My answer is no. So if I see you in class, I know who you are, you participate, I am very happy to give you a reference all day long. But if you're not, I'm not giving you one. Past clients from a different profession, if absolutely necessary to be used, can be leveraged. You just have to be very careful about how you present that information. And it probably depends on that client, who they are, what kind of prestige they might have, and what kind of relationship and what service you provided to them in the past. Current clients that you're working with but haven't closed a deal with yet, they also work very well. So if you have someone you're working with that's willing to write you a reference or give you a reference, that's something that could be really good for you. What other part of a CMA is really important? Not there we go. There's that 10 vials of blood. CMA is also probably the most important part of your listing presentation. Okay, so don't forget that. Comparative market analysis is individual each time, but it's going to be included in your listing presentation. And I also pool active and pending properties in a separate report with any notes I have on those properties. And those notes, I kind of go over that in comparative market analysis class, what I'm looking for with those. That's going to be a separate report I bring with me. That's also part of my listing presentation. Okay. You will want perhaps a reference list for handyman and things like that in there, but that's like an added plus. If you have past sales where you have marketing examples, you may want to include those if you think that they're particularly impressive. Okay. Maybe information on staging, things like that. A lot of this will already be included with the Keller Williams template for a listing presentation. A lot of it you're going to take out of that listing presentation package. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. Let's talk about what I do prior to a listing appointment, right? So I get a listing appointment. It is really important, guys, to give yourselves enough time to do the research necessary to win the client. Okay. So one of the biggest mistakes I see particularly new agents make because they get very excited and they set an appointment for same day, next day, whatever. If you're in mentorship, check with your mentor first. You want them there. They're your business partner for all intents and purposes. So check with them first. Remember, I'm your built-in backup mentor. So if they're not available, I can help you. But chances are, if you ask me to help you out with something the next day or the day after or 2 days later, I'm probably not available. Most of us have things, booked out about a week in advance. Not to say that we can't collaborate and come up with a time sooner than that, but just don't set the appointment. Even if it's just you on your own, don't set an appointment too soon. Sometimes pulling together a comparative market analysis can take days. It can be very difficult. Okay? But also, if you give yourself at least 3 days, it gives you the time to do all the stalking that you need to do to be really prepared for your meeting. So you want to see if you can social media and Google stalk the sellers. You want to pull title so you know who all the decision makers are. And if there's anything strange that you need to know about, you want to talk to a title rep and just say, hey, I have this listing appointment. Can you pull title for me? Can you take a look at it with me? Let me know if there's anything, abnormal. It's not a full preliminary title report, but they should be able to pull it up and tell you if there's anything abnormal about it. You want to look at Google Maps. You'll want to drive the neighborhood. You'll want to, like I said, pull a CMA, which requires calling everyone. Okay. You see any prices in your comparative market analysis that are particularly high or low, you're going to want to talk to the buyer's agent and the seller's agent and find out if there was something that put upward or downward pressure on that price. You'll want to very tactfully get as much information as possible out of the agents with stuff currently on the market or in escrow, because things that are in escrow on the market now can be comps by the time that you get an appraisal on your listing. Okay, so you need to know what's going on there. Also, you're going to impress the sellers by knowing all of these things and having done this extra work, because I guarantee you most agents do not do this extra work. And like I said, sometimes there are prices on property or things going on that are outliers, high or low. And so the more information you have about these things, the better you can present information to the clients so that they're not saying, oh, well, my house is worth this because this is listed at that, right? Well, first off, we know listing prices are not indicative of sales prices, right? But what a better, way to dispute without saying no to the seller than knowing why something is a certain way. Or yes, but I spoke to the listing agent. They've only had 2 showings and they've been on the market for a month, right? Like things like that. I mean, that's a very extreme example, but still. Yes.
About the timing, you told us like it's better to 3 days later, like let's say. Is it the one, because when we cold call, for example, we say, oh, is it tomorrow 1 to 2 is okay for you to be stop by? Is it this thing presentation is different than the one we just stop by and check the home?
No.
Is it the same? So
It should be the same. It should be better. There are different business models. I mean, you're chasing, I don't know. It sounds like the business model you're working with is quantity. I'm teaching you a quality route. So I'm teaching you ideal, perfect circumstance. Are there going to be times you have to take appointments sooner? Absolutely. Just know you're not going to be as well prepared as you could be if you give it a couple of days. But in your situation with the cold calling, these may be more non-committal people where if you don't get your foot in the door faster, you may lose the chance for the appointment.
right.
So there's always a trade-off, right? So remember, there's, what's that?
Case by case.
Case by case basis, yeah. Yeah, I'm teaching you ideal world, how to do everything perfectly, the way we want to do it and why it's important. You're gonna have to cut corners in your business all the time. And it's really important that you learn which ones are important, which ones aren't, which ones affect, how you ethically and just personally want to represent your business. Everyone runs their business differently. And different business models work for different people. And if you are running a numbers model, right, you may have 20 listing appointments. And so if you only come away with 3 listings, that's fine. Whereas I might only have 5 listing appointments and I need them, right? So I'm going to do everything I can to knock it out of the park. It just depends on your business model, right? So what Malika's talking about are going to be really cold leads where you need to get your foot in the door quickly before they change their mind. they don't know you, they have no skin in the game, right? For me, I'm getting mostly referral business. You're not going to cancel on me because their best friend is my client and very good friend, right? So it's just a different, and you have to exercise your judgment in it. But hey, even when we have very little time, I would, if I needed to, I'd stay up until 1 a.m. working sometimes on things that I want that business. So there's nothing that's too much or too, like takes too long for me to do if I can squeeze it in there.
I mean, like this presentation that you're talking about is the same because you haven't seen the home yet.
I'm going to talk about that, Malika.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to, like I said, Google Map stop. We're going to drive the neighborhood. You want to see that house, but don't get caught spying. That's really weird. Okay. Don't go up a private driveway, guys. No hiring drones, okay? I would say that not always, but oftentimes the exterior of a home, its condition is indicative of how homeowners care about for the interior of their home. But not always. I would say people tend to care more about the interior of the home than the exterior, right? So the exterior could be like, but the inside could be great. But generally there's a correlation, if the outside is nice and tidy and pleasant, the inside will likely be the same. If it's a disaster, chances are it's probably a disaster on the inside, yeah. You'll want to double check property specs with the property owner, okay, because property records where we're getting bedroom, bathroom count, square footage, it is often inaccurate, whether or not what is actually there is permitted, right? So I've had someone who did a massive remodel, like tripling their square footage, all with permits, but property, even though it was like 2 years prior, property records still did not reflect that additional square footage or bedroom, bathroom count, right? So you definitely want to double check those things with your clients. Also, if the lot is really large, you want to see what you can do to find out, how much of it's usable. And unfortunately, that's really difficult to find out. So, your best bet might actually be asking the homeowner what they think. Just don't count on it too much, right? A homeowner always thinks that their home is much better, much more buildable, much more everything positive oftentimes than it is in reality because they have a very emotional attachment to it. Even real estate agents. I think because I'm a technical agent, I represented a lot of other real estate agents who don't want to be involved in their own transaction. And, they're like, I want to be an easy client because, I know the business. Oh, hell no, they don't. I hear them saying things like, well, my house is the best house on the block. And I'm like, real estate professional or not? Who's emotional? So it happens. So you're going to, like I said, you're going to stalk as much as you can. You need to know what's going on in the neighborhood. You want to check the MLS for any past MLS listings. You're going to check all the specs so that you can pull comps with accurate numbers. You're going to pull together, when you pull your CMA together, very, very likely you haven't seen the interior of the property yet. So what I do is I don't actually include a dollar amount in my comparative market analysis. I have a range in my mind. And when I'm at the appointment, I tighten up that range very quickly. I'll talk to you about that one after I talk to you about preparation. So we'll talk about what I do when I get there for a listing appointment. So let's talk about what I do beyond the work preparation before the listing presentation. Make sure you have enough copies of all of your materials for all of the people you're going to present to. If at all possible, make sure that all of them are going to be present. You want an appointment with all of the decision makers present. Okay. Sometimes I bring a blank copy of a listing contract so they can see what that looks like. Some people will try to get their listing contract signed at the appointment. I typically don't because I think there's negotiation to be had as far as pricing. I'm not such a high pressure agent. I'm more about support, like providing them support to get prepared for market. I don't even know that I want the listing until we do some things. And I probably won't know until we do some things, like Is there a big problem I see with the home? Do we need to have something inspected or repaired? What kind of work are we gonna do? Do we need some upgrades or handyman fixes? Are we gonna stage? All of that kind of stuff. And that's all gonna affect how I go about presenting the listing, right? And the terms I want to negotiate for myself as far as providing the services. Sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes I'll do one on the spot because it's very rare that a seller actually agrees with me on what the value of their home is. It oftentimes takes a little while for me to get them to a point where I think the number is reasonable enough where I want to work with them. But again, earlier on in my career, I was more willing to take a risk. I was more willing to take an overpriced listing and hope for the price reduction. Or try to contractually bind them in the listing contract to giving me a price reduction if the property didn't sell within a certain time frame. I also make sure that I have a tablet, right, with all of my printed materials I'm going to bring with me, specifically the CMA and the report I've compiled with all of the active and pending competition that's on the market. Because when it comes to discussion about value, a seller doesn't usually listen to what I have to say about my professional opinion about value. So I lean on showing them, you know, like I had a seller who was like, no, my house is worth $3 million. I have ocean views. He had a peekaboo ocean view from above the sink in the kitchen, and that was it. And from the balcony off of the master bathroom, but only if you actually went out on the balcony. And he had a lot of square footage, but, and a big lot size.
It's not buggy, yeah.
Yeah, but the lot was all uphill, so you know, the lot like was completely unusable. There was no real yard, and it was in Brentwood, you know, Kenter Canyon area, so major family, like our buyer pool is typically family because they want to get their kids into that school district. Not every time, but most of our potential buyer pool would be interested in having a yard. And so I was able to pull comps. And while I didn't initially pull these, I didn't pull these in my CMA because they weren't comps. I was able to use my secondary report of competition that's on the market to get him to a more realistic place. I thought his home was worth maybe like 2.1 and he thought it was worth 3. That's a massive difference, right? So I broke it down to price per square foot. I happened to work at the same brokerage as some listing agents half a block down who had brand new construction on the market with a slightly bigger yard, with an actual yard, but small, but an actual yard. And I showed him that he wanted, you know, slightly more price per square foot than brand new construction on the same block. That had some things that his home did not have. Kept on coming back to his fucking peekaboo kitchen ocean view. I was like, nobody's paying for that. And no, I don't care how much more pleasant washing the dishes is. I still hate washing the dishes. So by showing him the specs and showing him the interior of these new construction properties and the information I got, because one of them had just accepted an offer, but these agents were at my brokerage and I sweet talked them into giving me numbers. I was able to get him to 2.4 and eventually 2.2. And we eventually accepted an offer at what? 2.1, just like I told him. You know, I showed him, and that was the only way I was going to get him to a more reasonable place. I probably would have been allowed to leave and not invited back if I didn't take the opportunity right then and there to show, like, have hard evidence, visual evidence that he can't dispute as to why there's no chance his property's worth that much money. Right, without saying that to him, because that's insulting to a seller, right? It doesn't matter if it's true. It's insulting. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. And you hear me say this all the time to you guys. It's about how you say it. So show him, don't tell him, or her, or them. All right, let's see what else. All right, let's talk about the day before my listing appointment. I do not send the seller anything. I do not confirm my appointment with them. I'll tell you why in a second. That happens on the day of my listing appointment for me. But you could do those things. There are different schools of thought on it, and you'll need to think about it. So the day before, I make sure I pick out my outfit. I make sure I put it on. So I don't have any new love handles, anything that's sticking out. So I don't see that there's a hem that's come loose. If it needs to be ironed, I iron it that day. I want to make sure I have enough time in my day and I don't feel stressed on the day of my listing appointment. There is nothing more important I do as a real estate agent, in my opinion, than that listing appointment. Right? It's like your first date for your potential life partner. If you're comparing real estate to, you know, romance. So I want to make sure everything's charged. I have everything together the day before. I'm not leaving for anything for the day of. I make sure I have enough gas in my car. Okay. I don't want to dress casually at all. Okay, but I don't want to dress too fancy unless the price range and the type of client permits that. Right. So am I wearing all my jewels and, you know, $2,000 shoes when I'm going for a 1.1, you know, condo listing on the west side? No, I'm not doing that. You really want your clients to see you as a reflection of who they are. They need to relate to you, right? They need to relate to you. You only need three things, right? Competence. They need to think you're competent. They need to like you and trust you, to want to work with you. But it's a whole lot easier to get to those three things if they feel comfortable with you, right? So when I go in for super high price ranges, like, you know, I look like Brentwood sweetheart girl, right? All of those women with their jogging pants wear their diamonds. So am I going to dress a little bit nicer there with some of my designer stuff there? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what they do. I just try to dress my audience, but I never wear tennis shoes or t-shirt to a listing appointment because no matter what the price range is, no matter what the client's like, I'm still providing a really professional service, a service that's super important to the person I'm basically interviewing with to provide that service for. And I need to remember that, I need to respect that. And so I am not wearing tennis shoes, I'm not wearing a t-shirt, I am pressed, I am clean, I am simple. You know, girls, cover yourselves up. Nobody wants to see that. You're looking for a listing, not for a husband, and under 5 million, it is the wife usually making decision anyways. Yeah, this is not selling sunset, girls and boys. Nobody's gonna call you up and be like, sell my $12 million house. Nobody's doing that. No, they're like, she's not going to sell my house, but I'll call her, right? I'm not trying to be rude or sexist here. Just be professional, right? You're providing a professional service. If you want something else, there's a different time and place for that. Guys too, be respectful. Nobody should be being flirty at a listing appointment or a buyer consult. You know, don't wear jeans.
No,
I mean, maybe wear jeans if you're wearing a blazer and great shoes or something, but you have to dress it up.
No rips.
What's that?
Like no rips.
Yeah, no ripped jeans. I mean, I'm trying to have them focus on who I am and what kind of service, what level of service I provide. I don't want to detract from that by letting my personal style get in the way, like get in between that connection and showing them who I am as a real estate professional. It's the same thing like I told you guys yesterday. My clients don't need to know what my political or religious beliefs are. There's no place in my business for that, right? There just isn't. I have a lot of clients that, you know, ask me charged questions like that all the time. And I have two ways of dealing with that. One is deflection, because honestly, I could give a false last about what happens in the world. I can barely control what happens in mine. Is that, oh, I don't really know enough about that to make a decision, you know, like to really have an opinion. But some clients who are really like politically involved or motivated can take that as, you know, lack of intelligence or care, which is not the case. So my other one is, I'm a real estate professional. How do you feel about it? You know, like I don't have a public opinion, and I'm keeping it that way. So I politely decline to comment, basically. So pull out my clothes, Don't wear heels, ladies, because you'll probably be hiking around and going in backyard if there's backyard space. Not to mention parking situation could be hard. You should have scoped out the parking situation well in advance when you were stocking the home also. So I make sure I get a good night of sleep, even if that means I have to pop a couple Benadryl or something to put me to sleep, because I'm oftentimes nervous the night before a listing appointment. You can control, for the most part, not always, what time of day you schedule your listing appointment. So if you're a morning person, try to get it in the morning. If you're not a morning person, try to get it later. I myself, even though I wake up really early, I'm not a big morning person. I don't like to take appointments before 10 a.m. because you're just not going to get the best version of me prior to 10 a.m. Say 10 a.m. to about 3 p.m. are my peak hours. I start to get tired after about 3. Can I do the job? Absolutely, if I need to, but my best and brightest self is 10 to 3. And if that means I have to push to a weekend to get those hours, I'll do it, because, you know, the brighter and shinier I am, the more likely I am to end up with that business. But again, it's a trade-off. Do I need to get in the door soon, or do I have time so that I can present best on my terms? Make sure you have gas in your car, okay? Make sure you know which way you're going. If I have enough time, I will oftentimes go to the gym in the morning before I go, because I'm nervous. I have nervous energy. Sometimes I will even sip coffee, or I'll have like a half cup of coffee in the morning because I feel so nervous. Not always, but usually depends on the situation. So just gauge that self, be really honest with yourself. I also have a really super dorky like rap star playlist of like why I'm a baller. I play in the car on my drive over how I'm gonna win, and buy really nice things and really big rings on my way to the listing appointment to kind of get some of that energy out and have fun with it. You know, for me, making fun of myself to myself is one of those things that helps me to boost my feelings. You want to get to your listing appointment at least 10 minutes early, but as soon as I get into my car to leave for my listing appointment, I text my potential client and I let them know that I'm on my way and I'll be there in blank minutes, or I'll be there on time. If it's quite a drive, I will let them know only like 15, 20 minutes. I'll do it in the middle of my drive. I only want to give them about 15, 20 minutes notice because I don't want to give them the opportunity to cancel on me. People feel pretty obligated when they know you're already in the car on the way, right? And this is why I didn't confirm my appointment the day before. I confirm my appointment when I'm on my way. I like to be there at least 10 minutes early to park, and I sit in my car. I make sure I double check my braces. There's no nasty food stuck in there. I make sure, you know, like I don't have too much or too little perfume. I kind of organize all of the reports and everything I'm bringing with me, so it's easy for me to pull and present. And I just wait, because being early is just as annoying, if not more annoying, than being late, right? So about 2 minutes before I'm supposed to be there, that's when I get out of the car and I walk up to the door.
It's a job interview, basically.
Yeah, it's a job interview, exactly. 100%, it's a job interview. So I get there. Hello, you know, all of that, very pleasant. If they have children or dogs jumping on my, you know, Versace dress, I don't care, I love them. Right? And one of the first things that I do is I kind of get into the room and I scope out, where do I want to do my listing appointment while I'm exchanging pleasantries with the people I'm meeting with. And I strategically ask, what's that?
The kitchen.
Yeah, I strategically ask if I can place my purse and briefcase down, and I set it wherever I think is most conducive to a good meeting, which is usually the kitchen table, so we can have cross eye contact. Okay, I do not want to sit in the living room or in back, you know, reclined in a big comfy chair or a couch, because that makes it very awkward for me to present, right? Makes it very awkward to share visual material. So I set it down at the kitchen table, which is my way of indirectly influencing where that actual sit-down meeting portion is going to take place. And here is where the fancy footwork begins. Remember, I told you, I go in there with a large price range in mind, depending upon the condition of the interior once I see it. So now I've exchanged pleasantries. I've sort of secured my location for where I'm going to deliver, my appeal. Now I need to focus on the personal relationship while getting a tour of the house. So I ask for a tour of the house and the seller starts to show me around. You want to ask questions. And most of these questions are so that you know how to talk to the seller and who they are. You've met their family, hopefully at this point, their animals. You're going to find out why they purchased a home, how long they've been in it, what they like about it, what they don't. How do they feel about the neighborhood? Well, what are their next plans? What's making them want to move? What's their typical day like in there? What kind of work have they done to it? Have they done any? These kinds of things. Have they had any issues with the home? All of that. You're gonna have them take you throughout the entire house. And if you see anything that looks wonky, like, oh, maybe that looks like an enclosed patio, you can ask them, oh, did you do that? Was it like that when you purchased? Do you know if it's permanent square footage? So a couple of things you'll be able to check during this time. While they're telling you how to speak to them and what their values are, you're going to be checking visually to make sure that the square footage you've calculated your value on seems to match what you are seeing. That becomes difficult, guys. So if you're not really spatially inclined, it's very important that you start to look at spec sheets before you go into open houses and brokers opens. So you can kind of start to get a feel for what different square footages look like. Okay? And keep in mind, high ceilings and things like that make smaller spaces seem larger than they are. After a while, you'll start to get a pretty good feel for being able to guesstimate square footage. Obviously not down to like 50 square feet or anything, but if it's more than 100 square feet off and you can't visually see that, you need a little bit more practice, okay? I mean, if it's a massive home, 100 square feet, it's not a big deal. But if it's your standard condo or single family residence and you're missing more than about 100 square feet, you need a little bit more practice on getting the visuals right. So do that. So you're checking all of that. And during this time, you have many things going on, right? But the most important part that you have going on is tightening up that estimate of price range that you're going to recommend. And 100%, I do not recommend doing this until you've seen the interior of that home. So it's tough. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I want you to be practiced. I want you to be polished. I want you to be ready to go. Now you see why I stress out so much before a listing appointment, because I have a lot of really important things to do when I walk into that room. And if everything else isn't already accounted for, there's a lot of pressure while I'm doing some very important things, probably the most important things that I do. Now that I have all the backstory, now that the sellers told me how to speak to them, what their values are, so that I make sure I include those in how I pitch what I've got to say. Now I'm going to hopefully go back to the kitchen table as strategically scoped out for where I'm delivering this information. Okay, so here I go. And I thank them, for the tour and the opportunity. I ask them if there's anything that they want to know before I go into my presentation, because I always make a point of making sure I listen to the client. I'm not a good listener. It's not a strength of mine. I'm impatient. I'm impulsive. I talk over people. I'm a little socially awkward. So this is a time I can't be. And so I make sure I'm checking in often to make sure that the seller feels heard, that I'm on the same base, that I'm addressing the things that they want to talk about, but I'm also always giving them the opportunity to voice any questions or concerns or just giving them the floor initially so they can talk to me. So I ask them if they have any questions or would like to know anything about me before we get started, but if not, or after we finish that, I go into the comparative market analysis first. I do not bother with what I do or how I do it or what we can do together unless I know the seller and I are somewhere in a reasonable agreement on the price range. So I go through the CMA, I go through the list of the competition that's on the market. Okay. Because if you guys are super far off, there's nothing further to be had. There just isn't at that point in time. Doesn't mean that the opportunity is lost forever. It just means that you have to get past that hurdle before you can get to the next one, right? So I focus on that with them. Now, if we're not in agreement, but it's not so far off that it's like, I think I told you about this, right? I had a listing appointment where I thought the house is worth maybe 3 or 4, like 3.5 to 4 million. And the guy's like, I want 7. You find someone who wants to overpay for a great property, let me know. And I'm like, yeah, we're done. But if someone like the client I just told you about, where the new construction, he was saying his house was worth more than the new construction until I showed him, who is maybe just emotional, wants too much for their house, but is a reasonable person where I can show them that's different, right? Even though I thought his listing was worth around 2.1, I took it at 2.4 because I thought he was reasonable enough to work with over time. And we discussed that opportunity up front. I also spoke to him, like, it's not all is lost, right? So if a client wants a number for a property that I think is going to be hard to achieve or even impossible, but it's not so far off, I will say, there are some things that we can probably do to increase the attractiveness of value. And so we can talk about staging or some slight improvements that they can make. We can talk about if they have the budgetary ability to do those things, right? So we're problem solving that difference, that we're trying to bridge that gap in the opinion on the pricing. But again, if there's someone I think I can work with, it's a personal choice for you, just as it is for me in your business since you're self-employed. Do I move forward with this person or not? If I think it's something that can work out, well, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with it. So even if we haven't come to an agreement on price, if I've deemed it as a risk I'm willing to take, then I'm going to move on and we can come to agreement. We can decide on the list price at a later time, right? So I also think oftentimes when the client is reasonable or we're not that far off on pricing, as they get to know me, they might begin to trust me more. And so they might give me a little bit more weight on what I have to say about the value. Or as things begin to close, or maybe they can double check on property that's about to close, where I've given them the information, but it's not reflecting as a sales price yet because it's still pending. Maybe those things influence their decision. So I'll go into I forgot this. I'm so sorry. Really key component of a listing presentation, guys, is a marketing plan. How you're going to market a property. Okay. So I'll go into the marketing plan with the seller at this point. If I think it's something that's viable for us. Okay, so let's backtrack for a second. Marketing plan. So my marketing plan is usually based on what I think the value of a potential listing is, right? I'm not going to go do drone shots for a little condo in the valley. You can't see anything with the drone, right? Unless it has some spectacular views or something, but I don't see why you wouldn't just be taking those off the balcony. So what is like basic marketing for all of the all listings, in my opinion? Well, it's professional photography, professionally written property description. What's that?
Yeah.
Open houses. I do a just listed announcement. I do an open house invitation for my first round of open houses to neighbors. I do showcase ads in the Broker Caravan magazine or any brokers opens I'm going to have. And I personally pledge to do every single showing the seller approves. Period. So I can do that because I have a team. Before I had a team, I would always have partner agents in the office that I had an agreement with where we would cover each other for showings and I would cross-train them on the property. Because in my opinion, I don't think there's anything more important beyond listing and presenting and pricing the property well, other than providing access, right? You have to provide access for someone to really make an offer. And so getting someone in is really important, which can be very difficult. You get into 4 or 5 escrows, let me tell you, scheduling a showing is going to become very difficult for you. So it's important you have a couple of friends in this office who you explicitly trust and you will do this favor back for. It's very important to have people who will cover you. And why do I think this is very important? I don't think most agents would mention this to their seller. I think it's super important because particularly in high-end agents play this stupid game where they act like it's a massive favor to show you their listing. Massive favor, not all of them. It's going out. You'll hear me say this a lot. I feel like there's an old school and new school method of being a real estate agent. New school is I'm a business person. Old school is a lot of ego, right? Like I closed the deal with Drew Fenton in January. When he was wrong, he just yelled, hoping that I would shut up and say, okay. That's old school real estate. Whoever can yell the loudest. And I was just like, are you done now? Can we go look at the facts? My husband would be like, who is that? And do I need to hit him? And I'm like, oh, he's gay. I can hit him if I need to. Anyway. So yeah, I make sure that my clients are aware of that and why it's so important. Now, when I start to get into higher price points, I may do things like providing, like hosting parties or wine and cheese for neighbors, twilight shots. I might do the drone footage if it's, you know, got a great view or it's got grounds, that kind of thing. What are some other things, guys?
3D tour.
Yeah, you can do a 3D tour. That's pretty cost effective. It's not very much money. So that might be something you want to offer. Standard. A lot of people will use much nicer like offering books with really beautiful spreads in the higher price ranges. You might do catered events for brokers, open houses, things like that, you know, or like mega houses in Bel Air. You know, they're hiring valet to park your cars for you when you go to see those properties a lot of the time. You know, or really expensive homes, you might be hiring a crew and putting together one of those really cute videos that you see for those mega houses, which, you know, the budget can be $10,000 to $30,000 for. So really, really just depends on the price point, what you're comfortable with, and is it a good business decision for you? So while for a, you know, $15 million listing, I might be willing to do most of those things. If they want me to list it at 25 million, when I believe it's worth 15 million, am I going to want to spend $10,000, $15,000 on a fucking video for this
Nope.
unreasonable, crazy person? No, I'm not. No, I'm not, right? So be careful what you put into your marketing plan. You may want to be vague about certain things. You may want to say property video and not elaborate. That way, if you still choose to take some of these higher risk opportunities, you are not bound into providing something that is a really bad choice for you to make. Unless you have so much money, you don't even need to be selling real estate. In that case, you can hire me. I'll represent you, no problem. Yeah. So I only go into marketing plan, then I go probably further into things as far as what happens. And talking to them about timeline and how I'm going to support them in anything they need to prepare the house for market. I will, most of the time I feel either or really good. I have a really strong indication about how I'm being received and how that listing appointment's going, right? So I will pull out a copy of the listing agreement. I'll let them know I'm gonna leave it with you so that you can see what it entails. I do also use it, and you hear me talk about this in listing contract class. I also use it to go over some things like security, securing valuables, open house signs, what happens once we start marketing the property, those kinds of things. I follow up with references, referrals. I encourage whoever I've met with to go ahead and feel free to contact them, that I've spoken with each of these people. They would be expecting their calls if they reach out to them, that kind of thing. And at the very end of it, I just ask them how they're feeling and if, they think they want to move forward. I don't push the business, but I still ask for it. I think it's really important to ask for the business, right? So maybe they're months off, they're not ready yet. So if that's the case, I am asking them when a good time for me to check back in would be. Or what, I want to know what factors they're waiting on. Maybe they've already told me in our appointment, in which case I'm not asking again. So I'll ask something like, oh, so when will you know if your child got accepted to that school? Should I check back with you, maybe a couple of days after you anticipate hearing from them? And write it down and calendar that. Because let me tell you, very few people do what they say they're going to do and follow up, particularly in this business, which is shocking to me. Do what you say you're going to do and people will be very impressed. I dated someone for 5 years that I did not think was cute. Why? Well, he asked me out in front of a whole bunch of little old ladies at the pharmacy late night, which I thought took some guts. I was impressed by that. And then he called me up, asked me on a traditional date, asked me what time he could pick me up, and he did all of the things he said he was going to do and shut up on time. He did it over the phone and not on a fucking text message. Great boyfriend. Don't tell my husband, probably the best boyfriend I ever had. And I never would have gone out with him. But, he did all the things that he said he was going to do, which really impressed me. He stood out to me in a way he didn't stand out to me at all before. So it's just, it should go without saying, but it's not anymore. Pick up the phone, do the things you say you're going to do, calendar, do not forget. A lot of times for important things like that, I'll calendar a day before reminder also. Okay. I also, if they say they need some time or whatever, they're interviewing other people, make sure you're classy. First off, it is unethical and a punishable offense for us to speak poorly of our colleagues. But I don't think it serves you well to do that at all. So if you don't know them or don't have anything nice to say, what's the rule? If you have nothing nice to say, you say nothing at all. If you have something nice to say it, I encourage you to say it. I think it has you stand out as a class act, right? It also opens the door for some conversations, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. So ask for the business, ask what their plans are. Make sure you have plans to follow up with them if they're not giving you the business right then and there, or you're not going back to the office to draft a contract after they talk. A lot of times a husband and wife, they want to speak while you're not there before they're going to commit to anything anyhow, even if they're totally gung ho to work with you. Give them that space and time. Thank them for their time, get out of there, turn on some more music, have a little blast party in your car because you're happy because it went well.
And would you follow up the next day?
I always send a thank you card. Yeah. I immediately go back to my office and send a thank you card if I didn't already have it written before. Yeah. I always send a thank you card. I don't do more, I don't do less. Just tell them that I appreciate their time. I look forward to speaking to them again.
In the mail.
Yeah. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions in the meantime. I don't think it's weird to drop the card off either. I think that's fine. What else?
Can you do it when you're just working out the house? Just,
Nah.
yeah. The chances are really small that they're gonna check the mailbox.
That day.
I mean, if they get it the same day, it's weird. That's real weird, right? It's real weird. And here's a tip, guys. If you drop off at the post office directly, mail gets to them much sooner than if you drop it at like a corner box or have it picked up from your house because it has to go get sorted and then sent back out. It'll just get sorted and go to its destination if you drop it directly at a post office local. All right. So what? Yes.
Just a question. So if you happen to get someone, on the hook at the end of the appointment, they want to work with you, they sign, what do those next hours of the following day look like?
So I kind of go over this in listing process overview,
Okay.
but you'll be opening title report. You'll be getting a lot of information filling out seller disclosures, putting together a listing timeline for when you can launch, because you're waiting on photography at very minimum to be able to put on the MLS.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it all depends on what needs to be done for preparation. Go ahead and look at the listing process overview class, and that'll kind of give you a better idea of timeline and how to structure it. I actually calendar out the listing launch timeline with my clients and on a shared calendar, and I invite them to important events and things like that to keep us all on the same page. Yeah. Right. So let's talk about some things that I have experienced or heard others experience that have influenced why I'm doing certain things, or, you know, performing my listing presentation a certain way. Why do I always speak very highly of agents if I have anything nice to say? Well, there was one time I was up for a listing against my old employer. And when they told me they were meeting with her, I said, that's fantastic. You know, I was able to tell them she's an excellent agent. I should know. She taught me everything that I know, right? And she is absolutely the neighborhood specialist, and she really helped me get my pulse on the market here. They decided to list with her actually, and not me, but they were class act enough to call me and tell me that. And they called me clearly before they called her. And I asked them why. And they said, well, you know what? She's just got more experience, and she's a neighborhood specialist. She has 12 listings in our neighborhood already. And I was able to say, I totally understand and appreciate that. You know, just one like tidbit for thought though. She's servicing those other 12 listings. While I may not ever have as much experience as she does, you know, I worked with her for 3 years very closely. I operate my business the same way. I do know a lot of what she knows, and I really respect her, but I'd be able to give you 100% of my time and attention. I would be completely focused on just selling your home and no one else's. Right, so I made a strength out of the weakness that they were poking at. And they actually did call me back a couple days later, and they listed the property with me because of the opportunity that I had to tell them why I understood their logic, but maybe there was, you know, a different way to think about what was influencing their decision. I'm not going to say it always pans out that way, but if you make it safe for people to voice their concerns or their rejection to you, it means that there's a conversation, and it means that you can have a response or introduce a new way of thinking. I can't promise you that, you know, I'd always be able to come up with something that clever that quickly, because it's just a conversation on the spot, right? But I never have that opportunity if they don't feel comfortable enough to have that conversation with me, right? And I've had buyers that rejected me before, but hired me to sell their home after they did buy. So remember to always keep it classy, keep a really positive relationship, those types of things, right? You never know that that door is fully shut, so just stay with it. Let's see. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far before we look at the KW command template for the listing presentation?
What's the usual time frame between you sign the listing agreement and it goes on MLS?
No usual time frame. They need to do a bunch of work at the house. It could be weeks or months.
Okay.
It's pretty much ready to go on the market. Depends on how quickly you can get your photos back and do your work.
You have to put the date that you signed the agreement on the MLS, or is that kind of?
I have a trick for that.
Because you were coming from right?
Huh? You're supposed to put something on the MLS within, I think, 2 days of having the listing agreement active. Huh?
If you check the box.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna tell them. But what I do is I just make it a pocket listing until I know what day I want to put it on the MLS. Then I alter my listing. I modify it with a modification of existing terms document, deleting the SELM for the pocket listing and making the listing period active as of the day I want to put it on the MLS, so I can show 0 days on market.
Right, so you go through the whole process of MLS, the only difference is you put it in as a.
I take it as a pocket listing, so I'm circumventing the rule of having to put it on the MLS within 2 days.
Okay.
While
You
I
don't touch
still-
the- touch the MLS.
I don't touch the MLS, and then I use a document like magic to make that all disappear and alter the listing start date to the date I want to put it on the MLS, so I'm 0 days on market, but the entire time I've had an active listing. First pocket, now traditional, yeah. Yeah, any more questions about what we've discussed so far? Is that a hand up? No? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up KW commands then. Hi, Sloan. All right, no one from the office is around, right? The KW template for listing presentation has so many pages, it's ridiculous. No seller is gonna sit there with you for that long and look at all of them. A lot of them say the same dumb bullshit, just different ways. You don't need 5 pages about one topic, you need one, if it's even necessary. Also, a seller is not buying your brokerage, they're buying you. And anyone who thinks different, you need to help them to understand that, you know, and I always use, like, I don't know why hairdresser references, but you'll find whatever works for you, is that I won't go to just anyone, even in a high-end salon. I go to the hairdresser that I like, that I trust, right? That I've been referred to or have been going to for a long time. I don't just randomly go in there because it's a great hair salon in an expensive area, right? So that's what it's like working with an agent. You're buying the agent and the services they provide, what brokerage they are affiliated with has zero to do with what kind of performance and skill your agent has. Okay, so you're gonna go to this little icon on the left-hand side with the paintbrush that says designs. Select that. So I pull out all of the stuff about KW because clearly they're gonna know I'm with KW Beverly Hills, but I'm not here to sell KW Beverly Hills. I'm here to sell myself and my team. All right, so there's a bunch of different templates in here. Okay, I'm just gonna select this one. And KW also pushes a lot of their in-house services. You'll see all over the place, like their KW mortgage and things like that in the buyer presentation. If that's not in line with the way you're operating your business, you take it out. Nothing should be in your presentations that doesn't need to be there. And that might be different for different presentations you're providing, right? So while you need a base listing presentation, a base buyer consult package, you might be modifying those, just like the marketing plan you might be modifying based upon the situation, based upon the client, based upon the property. Okay. Over here to the bottom right where it says pages and select that. And you can go through these pages and see what they say. You can modify all of this. Like here, it starts with the first page being KW. No, I'm LA native. My team is LA native. So I'm branding this with LA native, right? So remember to leave your foot forward with the presentation you're providing. I'm not presenting KW Beverly Hills. I'm not presenting KW. I'm presenting LA native and myself, who hang their license, who are affiliated with Keller Williams Beverly Hills, right? And for me, it's a non-starter that I wouldn't present myself and my team first. Okay. Page 2, I think, is instructions. Buyer consult. Didn't we still.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah. What did I do?
You have the same form, like the.
It just looks the same, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I skipped some steps. So back to designs. I'm gonna go to start from blank. New folder, templates. I'm gonna go to templates, not my designs. That's where I was wrong. So templates, I'm gonna go down to where it says listings. I'm gonna select listing presentation. And I'm gonna select this one. Think. Okay, so like that's weird, right? Oops. You can modify all this stuff pretty easily. If you don't know how to use KW command, I highly recommend learning how to do so just to pull a listing presentation and buyer consult package together, if nothing else. Okay. Pages, there's an instruction page. Obviously, an instruction page needs to be pulled out. I have found spelling and grammatical errors as well as technical errors in the information in these presentations. Because remember, we're a national company and the person writing these, well, they may not be a real estate agent at all, or they might be, but they're not in our area. And what they think is standard and normal practice might not be for us, might be handled slightly differently. So you need to read every single word in your presentations. You need to make sure that they are accurate. You need to make sure you want them to be seen and read. Okay? This is one of the most important things that you're ever going to put together as an agent. And over time, as your experience level changes, this is going to change along with you. I would say on average, a successful agent is probably updating their listing presentation and buyer consult at least once a year. Okay? But to start with, that's going to be the hardest part for you. So if you need to come up with branding and things like that, colors, obviously it's going to take you more time the first time around. Let's see here. I want to get into some examples of just why you throw stuff out. So if you guys were in class yesterday, you would have heard me say, if you need a table of contents page or a page outlining the different sections of your presentation is way too fucking long. Take that out and make your presentation shorter and more streamlined. Again, what do we need to focus on in a presentation? Not the actual presentation, right? What are we focusing on? Yeah, eye contact, client relationship. Because if you secure the relationship, you will secure the business. I don't care how amazing you are technically at your job, what you know. If they don't like you and trust you, they're not giving you their business, right? So know your presentations, know what's coming next, use them more as a reference point, something to point out. I look at a listing presentation as something I leave behind to remind them of me, right? And a reference point to make sure I'm not missing anything, but not much else. It uses a lot of specs in here, okay? The specs that KW uses comes from Kelly, and the Kelly app that gives you specs like your home is 10% larger than the average property sold in Barton Hills. Well, is Barton Hills an MLS area? Nope. The Kelly app doesn't follow the geographical barriers, the geographic barriers of the MLS. So stay away from using any statistics from the Kelly app because it's going to be in direct contradiction to what other agents are telling them and what your own research that you painstakingly pulled is going to tell them. Do not use the Kelly app specs. It's no bueno. You're going to contradict yourself accidentally. And I don't think you're getting business if you can't even be consistent in one presentation as to what data you're working with. That's also this page here. Then it actually makes CMA part of the presentation. I like the CMA package to be separate from my presentation. I do keep them separately. But you could include it if you wanted to. I don't recommend using this template. I recommend using Cloud CMA and just making it a part. Making it a part of your listing presentation. Let's start to get into some other things. Let's see. I wish this was faster. Your needs come first. You can have a little bit of fluffy stuff in here. Try to find something that I would instantaneously take out of here. It has all this open house strategy and all of this stuff, redundant stuff. That's part of your marketing plan, guys. It doesn't need to be 10 pages of different things. Here's a few pages later, proof is in your numbers. That stuff is all in your CMA. You don't need this stuff to be reiterated. There's just much more chance for error if you're trying to come up with specs and numbers on your own and impose them into a different part of your presentation. Keep them separate. You know, like you might not have credentials and awards in real estate to put in here. So you see like why I think like 80% of this should be removed from your presentation. I'm just randomly choosing pages here also. But I will tell you, in both the buyer consult package and the listing presentation, there are both pages as to what happens, and it's inaccurate. And the clearest example I can use is that it says there's a real estate attorney involved. I don't have a real estate attorney involved in California, and fuck your life if you do, because they have no idea what they're doing. Because really beyond like contract dispute after it closes and litigation and things like that, they're not typically involved in a transaction. And they want to complicate things so that they can bill hours. So they're not helping you, they're not helping anyone. So I really don't want to put it into my buyer or seller's minds that they should have a real estate attorney involved, because that is not standard practice here in residential real estate. It's not. Can you keep them from doing it? Absolutely not. Should you discourage them from doing it? Absolutely not. But I certainly don't want to introduce the idea to them or encourage them to when they wouldn't otherwise think of it. Yes.
This is actually really often a concern from my potential buyers, because typically in the foreign countries, a real estate attorney is always the person who is going through the deal.
Yeah, that's because the real estate industry is not as regulated as.
Yes, absolutely. How I can, show the stronger side. I mean,
Well, you can show them the contracts and things like that, that they're templated out. And you can tell them about how it's regulated and what our regulatory oversight authorities are and things like that. Yeah. Most people from other countries, when they have that kind of concern, when I give them the explanation, they kind of drop it at that point. I haven't had people press me after I show them and tell them that. But if they want to, go ahead. You know what my response is? Go ahead. If you'd rather spend the money on an attorney who who isn't typically involved in this part of the transaction than your home, by all means, be my guest. I also encourage them to talk to people that they know that have already purchased or sold here. I want to find one of these stupid things, but I can't see the little thumbnail pages.
Since you haven't, seen the home, this is just an initial meeting. You
Yeah.
wouldn't have things like, the properties, like a photo of, 1050 Heather Lane.
No, you wouldn't necessarily unless it's been sold recently, been on the market recently, or you drove by and take a photo. But again, I don't want them to know I've been stalking them. That's fucking creepy. So I don't have the photo of the property on the front. Yeah, but just what I'm saying is customize all of this. And I really wish I could see. Oh, here we go. Like, here's the process page. Receive and present offers, begin attorney review, right? I do not want this in my listing presentation. I might want an overview of the process in my listing presentation, but as it stands, I don't want this. So I would revise this. I do have a listing process overview in my listing presentation, but I've revised this to make sure it's proper, and not introducing ideas that are not accurate. You guys can't even see it, what I'm reading here to you. I didn't realize it's so tiny. And I don't know how to make it bigger, I'm sorry. Custom marketing plan, we've already talked about that.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Proof is in my numbers. I'm just reading what this is. Leading the way. No. Bottom line.
Can you change out the artwork? Like,
Oh yeah, you can change anything you want. Like, look, yeah, you can upload photos, take classes on KW Command. Like there's there's a page in some of these presentations that are pages regarding, like, can anyone remember what it's called? The concierge service that will basically loan sellers money to make improvements or repairs to their home before going to market. What is it called?
California
Anyways,
concierge.
What's that?
California concierge.
I think it's called something else unless they've recently changed the name, the one that we use here. That's our in-house. In any case, I take things like that out and I introduce them verbally if I need to. Just because I think it's a complicated process and it's really only an option for people who absolutely need it for some reason. I don't want to go into that conversation unless I need to. A couple of them have like multiple pages on staging. I think there only needs to be really one page on staging. So what I'm saying is look at every single thing, read every single thing, make sure it's accurate, make sure it reflects what you want it to reflect, change it to what it needs to be, make sure other very experienced agents look at it. And then when you have something you think works that you're happy with, you need to practice presenting your listing presentation. There is a mandatory practice activity with your mentors in the mentorship program where they pretend to be a seller and you give them a listing presentation. Okay. Also, I'd like you to role reverse and do it opposite way. But beyond this, I want you to do this with other agents in the office that you're friendly with. I want you to do this with your friends and family. I also want you to do this with your mean friends who are honest with you and will tell you where you are weak because you need to improve. But bottom line is you need to practice this so much because you need to be super familiar with what the content is so you can focus on that personal relationship and the fancy footwork of getting that property value together and and presenting to the seller what they need presented, the way they need it presented, so that you achieve your objective of obtaining the business, right? And so if you're not super solid and comfortable with your listing presentation, you're not going to be able to focus as much energy on those other key parts that are more important. So practice, practice, practice. I'm happy to look at what you think is your final draft of your listing presentation once you have it ready. Just let me know and email it over to me. This will take you a long time. So if you don't have a listing presentation, you are already behind. You cannot provide a listing presentation until you have your presentation package together. Can you do it? Yes, but is it going to be as good as it could be? No. And so you are behind. You have less of a chance of obtaining that business. So get on it, guys. All right. Any questions? Nope. No. Okay.
Thank you, Kristen.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Kristen. Kristen, actually, I do have one question for you. This is Sebastian, by the way.
Okay.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, Kristen, I do have one question for you in regards to the marketing plan that you put together. When you're presenting that, do you, in this day and age, think it's effective to leverage, let's say, if you have a social media presence in that marketing plan?
If you have a
Market on
really
social media?
presence. If you have a really
Pardon?
significant presence. I said,
Okay,
if you have,
only if you have a significant one.
yeah. Or they ask.
Okay, great. I was just curious on that. Thank you so much. It was a great class.
Or I thought of starting like staging. So like all like responsibility wise, is that like an investment that the agent puts together or?
No, seller pays for staging.
Okay.
It's the only thing seller pays for.
And virtual staging?
Usually listed, usually agent.
Things that will do it.
It's much cheaper.
Would be the single unit investment.
Did you need me?
I'm great, thank you.
Thank you,
So, I gotta
Kristen.
find somebody.
I thought about coming, but I was like.
They cannot open that line of credit, no?
Nobody likes to do a second, to be second position